Hello, and welcome to Let Them Eat Cake. My name is John. My co-host is Jack. Today we're talking to Jared Ball, a professor of Africana Studies. If you don't know what Africana Studies is, this is the perfect episode for you. This episode is meant to come out at the beginning of August to kind of coincide with Black August. And if you don't know what that is, this is the perfect episode for you. We weren't able to release it in the beginning of August because YouTube hit us with a strike, and that prevented us from uploading for about 2 weeks. And then after that, both my animals got pretty sick, so I've had to do a lot of running around and caring for them. So that's why we have a little bit of an informal intro today. If you are aware of what Black August is, this might be a little bare bones for you. It's very much an intro to Black studies and Africana studies. Black August is similar. This is oversimplifying. It's similar to Black History Month, but Black History Month we look at, figures like Rosa Parks, Martin Luther King that you've heard of, when Black August is specifically more about the revolutionary struggle. So Black August, it commemorates first with a prison riot, and it's very much in the base of this prison abolition and the over-incarceration of the Black community. And if you think that maybe you're Charlie Kirk and want to cite statistics about how, a certain amount of Black people commit a certain amount of crimes, you need to look at also the exoneration. The exoneration of African American men is by far the highest. So it statistically actually shows not that Black people commit more crimes than white people, but that they are incarcerated more than anyone else for crimes they did not commit. This is fact. This is fact backed up by exoneration. So that's a little bit more into what Black August is about and the revolutionary struggle. We don't dive too much into Black August. Like I said, this is a little bit of an intro to this type of thing. If you've heard terms like woke or CRT and you don't really know what that is, that's what we're doing today. You're still a supporter of, Black Lives Matter, things like that. This is going to be a lot of information to start you out. And what's great about it is that as you'll hear from Jared himself, he hosts a show called A Mix What I Like, which, after you watch this, you can go over to his channel and you can learn a lot more about these things, get really up to speed in probably an area that you haven't spent much time thinking about because it doesn't really affect you too much. So that's all I have to say for the intro, and hopefully we'll get a little bit more into things like this with scholars and intellectuals in the future. We haven't really been shooting a lot of the Let Them Eat Cake episodes because so much effort actually goes into finding the guests and things like that, and streaming has just been a little bit more rewarding. So if you haven't seen our streams, we no longer stream to YouTube because YouTube is anti-creator. So you can go to Twitch, Rumble, and Kick, 5th Gen IW on all the platforms. It's the same on all platforms. Whatever you want to use, you can check that out. And probably from now on, the only thing you'll really see from YouTube is maybe highlights on the stream and any Let Them Eat Cakes that we actually can line up really solid guests for. Hopefully we're going to be doing one in a little bit, going over what's going on in Lebanon right now with Hezbollah disarming, and should be really in depth with Miriam from our 5th episode. Anyway, so here's the episode. I hope you enjoy, and if you want to see more like this, please let us know. Make sure to, rate it 5 stars, give it likes and all that engagement so we can actually be boosted in the algorithm, because the algorithm is pretty anti-Black studies. If you do stuff about Black studies, the algorithm really doesn't seem to like it, which is very strange if you ask me.
We have a weapon more powerful than their British Empire, and that weapon is our refusal to bow to any order but our own, any institution but our own.
My name is Jared Ball. I'm a professor of Africana and Media Studies. I host I Mix What I Like. I am often a critic of capitalism and particularly the Black capitalist narrative.
Could you just elaborate on what that is a little bit?
Which the latter?
The black capitalist narrative, yes.
Yeah, just Black capitalist narrative is just one that was evolved over the last 150 years to argue that Black people can free themselves by engaging in the entrepreneurial process and find their way within capitalism. And it was constructed and imposed as counterinsurgency, as psychological warfare, as a way to distill the tendency to rebel among a colonized population.
Okay, and when would you say that this actually began? Like, not specifically like date and time, but like a general period, like in what
Post Jim Crow,
Yeah.
pre Jim Crow.
No, pre-emancipation, really. It started during enslavement, as a certain segment of the enslaved community was sort of set in a small business capacity to serve masters and the local white community. And then so-called emancipation, those origins sort of took hold and were encouraged and as a pathway to equality, when it was understood that that would never be the case. I mean, that's really the point, that's not a solution. But if it's encouraged, then the tendency is to not rebel and to seek the American dream.
Semi-related, but I've seen this a lot lately. But what do you think of this like narrative about Lincoln didn't free the slaves; they freed themselves?
Well, I would have a criticism, a little bit of both. I mean, Lincoln didn't free anybody. I mean, that's just fact. I mean, his Emancipation Proclamation was a military tactic designed to spark rebellion in the South, but it had no legal weight, as it targeted states that had seceded and didn't see him as president. So factually, technically, it's correct. He didn't free anybody, nor were his interests in freeing anybody. He was not interested in creating a free and equal society. He said himself repeatedly, this was a tactic to save the Union. The flip side is also that, so in that sense, I struggle just with the claim that there was this, and that there exists this thing called freedom. But to the extent that it's understood popularly, yes, the enslaved did a lot more to free themselves than Lincoln did, and that is largely just born out of the history of insurrection, sabotage, and so on. The ruling elite were learning that this process was not the best, safest, and most lucrative method of
I was about to say profitable.
Wealth. Yeah, absolutely.
We've talked about that a lot. But wasn't it Lincoln who literally said that if he could preserve the Union without abolishing slavery, he would?
Yeah.
Like I like explicitly remember that was Lincoln. So it's like it is pretty interesting that this narrative has persisted. So how in what way would you say maybe not necessarily the state, but I guess the state would have encouraged this narrative, like to whitewash it, to say Lincoln did free the slaves? Like what is the incentive to have that, do you think?
I mean, part of the incentive was to, even in it, I mean, you could argue that just as it was in its inception, the goal was to wed a certain segment of the Black community to the United States tactically, to say that this structure, this state formation is the best thing you have as an option. So therefore, accept it and accept fealty and allegiance to it, because it plays out to this day. Another part is a way to get this so-called newly freed population to be part of the then Republican Party by saying we're the party that freed the slaves. And on some level to this day, they still use that.
I hear that repeatedly. Yeah. Commonly hear that. Yeah.
But it's also part of the grand myth of origin of the United States, that from the beginning, this thing has been about freedom and democracy, and with a few hiccups here and there, a little bit of indentured servitude, a little bit of enslavement, a little bit of genocide, a little bit of this, that, and there sprinkled in. we've ever been marching forward progressively towards some equal land of the free. And in many ways, it's a remarkable tactic in branding that this country can be this abusive to this many people and then claim singular special credit for then addressing itself to some degree to what it has already caused as an abusive situation. So it's like we can enslave you and then we can say you're free, and we in each case we get credit. I mean, it's like in each case there is this attachment to, again, this fantastical myth of origin of this country that is the United States, to say that it was born in freedom, in the search for freedom, and eventually it brought freedom and prosperity and opportunity to everyone, even those it formerly enslaved and committed genocide against. So it's just as a marketing tactic, it's brilliant, but obviously flawed as a historical narrative.
Yeah, we talk a lot. We use the term romantic nationalism.
Yeah.
Specifically referring to these types of things, and it's like when we talk about fascism, defining fascism, it's like the core has to be that romantic nationalism.
Absolutely, it's essential, and it's a good way of putting it.
When we were talking earlier before we started, Jack said, "What is Africana studies? Does that mean like South African Africanus?"
Oh no, not like Afrikaner, Africana.
Okay.
So what is popularly known as Black Studies in the United States, which emerges as an intellectual arm of the Black liberation movement, broadly speaking, in the United States, and was literally in many ways, like the program I attended, forced onto campuses, in some cases with arms. So it has an absolutely a liberationist foundation, but it is also one that has been meant to address itself to the entire African experience, and has sought to argue that Black people here in the United States and as elsewhere are part of an African diaspora and should not limit their self-concept to the colonial experience here or elsewhere. So there's been sometimes you call the movement, sometimes fights, sometimes debates over the nomenclature. I happen to have gone to the Africana Studies and Research Center at Cornell University under then the founding director, the late great Dr. James Turner, who himself and others advocated for the use of the term Africana as a means to represent the entire African world experience. So some would still say Black Studies, some say Africology, some say African World Studies, some say, there are others I'm probably forgetting, but there's a variety of names that the field can go by, and in some cases to distinguish some differences. That just happens to be the way technically I'm in I teach in our school's African and African American diaspora program. It just is a lot of words to say.
It's a mouthful.
So yeah, and given my previous bias explained, I just say Africana and Media Studies because communication is my other degreed field of expertise, I guess. So,
okay, well, staying in that field, there's been a lot of confusion about what critical race theory is. Could we go into some what critical race theory is, just to like clear that up for anybody who's curious, including myself?
So I'll do the best I can. This is not my area of expertise, so I want to encourage people to not, as well as I do with anything, don't take my word for it. And
please
follow
give
up.
recommendations, for people, like further readings, anything. Go for it.
Well, a great place to start is, I was wondering if I have it in here, is a classic reader called the Critical Race Studies Reader, where you can read all of the foundational scholarship, primarily that of the late great Derek Bell, who is often credited as the, or a, if not the, a key figure in the foundation of the field. And Derek Bell, who was a law professor initially, critical race theory is something that emanates out of the law, out of legal studies. And it's overly simplifying. I'm doing way too much to oversimplify it here, but it essentially argues that the anti-blackness of this U.S. society is ingrained to the point where something beyond normal discussions of change would need to occur, that there has evolved a particular hostility to Black people that has formed as either part of or around all of this country's institutions to have them all operate fundamentally against Black people. And one of my favorite, at least quotes, I'll probably be paraphrasing it now. It comes from Derek Bell, and as a I think a way to summarize his argument, which is that he once wrote that public policy in the United States is situated in such a way that it is ultimately its impact is ultimately the same as taking hundreds of Black people out to a secluded field and shooting them every week. In other words, the damage, the impact, the violence, the death associated with public policy in this country is the equivalent of random assassination of hundreds of Black people per week in this country. So critical race theory, that's what that, and there's been a lot of Dylan Rodriguez, Kimberly Crenshaw was involved. I mean, there are others, the names are, but Derek Bell is probably the name that people would want to start with. That's essentially what the argument was. Now, critical race theory has become a catchphrase in this country for anything that addresses itself critically to the history of the United States, and in particular, the settler colonial white nationalist supremacist behavior that has been associated with it against Black and brown and indigenous people. And so most of the people who talk about critical race theory popularly in the United States have never read a word of it, don't understand its history and origin, and misapply the phrase all the time, and really just mean, as I said, any critical research or study into the history and origins of this country and its evolution of races. That's what it's come to mean. So it's in many ways a consistently frustrating issue, and given that not only are people misidentifying, misrepresenting, and not reading these fields and these studies and these works, but they're just looking to condemn any challenge to the romantic nationalism, as I think you just called it a moment ago. That's ultimately what. So anything that does that is deemed critical race theory and set for targeting.
Okay,
It's kind of been replaced by using the word wokeness now.
It's beautiful because in each case with critical race theory and the term woke, these are terms and phrases that emanate from Black people meant to inspire a radical critique of this country that have then been they have been sort of co-opted, corrupted, and turned against those very movements. Now, when you hear woke, it's just some dismissive, silly, oh, you're being woke. But initially, the whole point was be woke. Black people telling one another, stay woke, as we should, as people should be encouraged. Be awakened to the processes that are negatively impacting your life. And now they've, of course, been turned into memes and jokes and catchphrases for a white supremacist ruling elite.
Well, I was going to say that when I first heard the term like woke, like I interpreted it as specifically like an awareness of like how predatory everything is, like with marketing, advertising, through music and all that stuff. Like
Absolutely.
specifically like what you were saying, like the myth of Black capitalism. Is that what you said?
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
So how accurate is that? Is that pretty
No,
much?
I think that's exactly right.
It means?
Yeah. And the two sort of overlap. That is the mythology around Black capitalism and this condemnation of what woke originally meant. Is that in each case the point is to try to convince Black people and others that what you claim or think is happening to you really isn't, and if you would just self-correct and be more financially literate and be smarter and be whatever the sort of white fantasy is that Black people are and that white people are of themselves, then you can achieve as anyone else can, and that you can access all this free and wonderful opportunity, and you don't need to be critically awake, and you don't need to be involved in critical political organizations and radical movements to change the world. You don't need to do all of that, because all these claims of wokeness and criticisms of capitalism are themselves your own self-defeatist victimization, self-inspired myths that operate and hold you back. So I think you have it exactly right, and I do think that there's a nice little overlap there between this promotion of Black capitalism and a critique of being woke.
So I reached out to you because you were criticizing how a lot of these people seem like they don't platform Black scholars. I think it was specifically you were talking about Sam Cedar at the time, but like I really can't think of anyone I've seen on any like program.
So, I mean, on the one hand, this is why there's been a sort of theme in Black radical politics that has a particular criticism for white liberals. On the one hand, white supremacists are easy to condemn. It's pretty obvious. But the liberal attitude is a little more nuanced and difficult to identify, but ultimately works in very similar ways to suppress ultimately Black radical ideas and politics and histories in favor of, again, just a more liberal and self-affirming approach to examining what's been happening to Black and other communities. So whether it was Dr. King, Malcolm X, Assata Shakur, Kwame Ture, I mean, really the list is endless. There's always this particular criticism for what Malcolm described as the difference between the fox and the wolf. The wolf is obviously trying to eat you. The fox is a little more pretty and dancing and whatever, but has the same goal. So it's and then what I end up noticing, and what I've seen a lot in my career and life, is that the social distance between white and Black communities in the United States is very obvious when dealing with white liberal or so-called progressive media. You can see how these communities don't interact, and how there is, outside of a handful of a few favored exceptions, very little engagement between white scholars and journalists with what has broadly been described as the Black radical tradition. So when I watch Sam Cedar, or more recently revisiting something from Katie Halper a couple of years ago with Norman Finkelstein, it is this.
They love that guy.
Finkelstein is great when it comes to the discussions.
Did you say they love that guy or you love him?
No, I said they love that guy.
I'm sorry. I thought you said you did. Yeah, no, they do.
No, they love that guy.
And I think when it comes to discussions of the so-called Middle East, there's reason for that. I have a certain appreciation for his work as well. But when it comes to discussions nowadays of wokeness and race, he's not in his lane. But his commentary, given his latest book on the Black scholarship, has been welcomed in certain white liberal spaces uncritically, in part because people respect him for his previous work and they don't have any meaningful engagement with that Black scholarship. As I'm just catching up to, because I'm a couple of years late to this, but in response to my criticism of Norman Finkelstein, it appears as though there had been this attempt by Katie Halper to bring on Doctors Robin Kelly and Barbara Smith, who are Black studies legends, to have this friendly conversation, slightly critical, but friendly conversation with Finkelstein about what I had been more critical of with him in our discussion. But mostly beyond, aside from the personal, whatever, what again became very clear is that Katie doesn't engage Black scholarship very often, and therefore, because of some celebrity and popularity, can reach out to some popular scholars whose work they are not familiar with beyond the name, and then appear to be having some meaningful conversation. And I don't think it was very helpful or fruitful. In fact, I think it was very disrespectful to Black studies and scholarship. But it's really my point is that it's a persistent problem that I think inhibits necessary advances that would have to occur if there's going to be some grand unified effort to smash imperialism and so on.
Just on the Black scholar thing, like, who better to get these ideas across? You know what I mean? Like, we see it all the time where they'll go to, instead of going to someone who like is from the area or something like that, they'll go to some white dude in a suit to get his take on the area. And it's like, why? Why do I care what this guy has to say? And this is actually a thing that I've come to realize as of late, like the last couple years, because I've kind of refocused everything and have been more open to ideas and listening to different people and not sort of pigeonholing myself into listening to certain people. And it's like, you're 100% correct. They don't get invited on. So I want to ask, before we go on to the next thing, how does Piers Morgan shape up?
Honestly, I don't watch. I have to be fair here. I don't watch a lot of mainstream content unless it's being distilled through someone else's criticism. So
That's
I would have
basically
to.
all we do is news review.
Yeah, I can only say that I've seen the Piers Morgan show in excerpts, and again distilled through someone else's program. What I can say, and I would have to say some of this would have to be updated with some details. I haven't looked at the latest research on this, but what Piers does seem to be doing is following traditional modes of operation and behavior when it comes to these issues, as the mainstream has forever. And either there's very little diversity, or when there is diversity in terms of race, gender, or sexuality, there's very little diversity in terms of politics. Because again, the point, as Kwame Ture said, and I quote all the time, Black visibility is not Black power. So the goal isn't to just have a few more Black people pop up in these spaces. The goal is to have Black people, well, fundamentally organize and assume political power. But in terms of an analysis, the goal or the difference would be are Black radical or critical perspectives of a variety of forms being consistently invited into the discussion. And that's something we never see. And so in terms of the mainstream, my focus over the years has been on the nominal left, alternative, and progressive media, and where are the differences and too often the similarities in their performance in terms of engaging these voices. So that's why I was saying, if anything, when I mention Sam Cedar or Katie Halper, my point is that they claim to themselves be the alternative to the mainstream. And yet, as I've often also pointed out some years ago of outlets like Democracy Now!, a very famous, high quality alternative. But when it comes to race and platforming radical ideas from the world's majority, they don't do that much better than the mainstream. So this is, again, that's been where, so Piers Morgan doing it, I'm not surprised. Fox News, MSNBC, CNN doing it, I'm not surprised. It's these, again, nominally alternative spaces that follow a similar pattern that become a bigger problem for me, and where I'm more interested in being critical. I wouldn't, again, what little I've seen of Piers Morgan and the like, I wouldn't encourage anyone to get any form of information on any subject from these sources. I
could not agree more.
Yeah, exercise severe caution.
Yeah.
I mean, his show is really for entertainment.
Mm-hmm.
He's the new, he's a digital Jerry Springer.
That, from what I've seen, that makes sense. The only difference is the in studio liveness where they can actually physically hit each other.
That would be so much more fun.
It would be much more fun. But yeah, no, you're right. I think that's a good way, and I hope people appreciate that Springer comparison.
Because it is interesting that you bring up that the alternative sort of left space also does this, because we from the get-go, the first thing we said is we're not doing the suit thing. We're finding people, even if it takes weeks to get interviews. We're talking to people from the area who know, and like that was a primary thing that we wanted for our show. So it's very interesting because it's not something that I ever picked up on, because I guess I would assume that they would. Because like obviously we're aware that the corporate press does it. They're going to the approved voices that the corporate overlords tell them to, right? But these people are supposed to not have that oversight. They can go to the people that they're supposed to go to. So what is the solution to this? Like how do you get over this I guess ingrained methodology of presenting news?
I mean, I think like with anything, it starts with a recognition of the issue and just being conscious, and to the extent that, I mean, you seem to have done this, and you've just been conscious of a situation and made a conscious effort to address it. So that's what came to my mind as you were forming the question was the work of our comrades at Millennials Are Killing Capitalism, Jared Ware in particular, who is the white host of Their Lives, and who probably more than most, at least as well as anyone, has stayed abreast of all of the, not all, but as much as is logically possible, work and efforts of Black and other radicals in their scholarship in journalism, and does a great job of incorporating that on a regular basis into the work that they do over there. And I think that's a good model. And essentially all, as far as I can tell, all that entails is making part of your media diet Black radical media, scholarship, tracking a little bit of the academic world and production, and reading that work and inviting the authors on to talk. I mean, they do, like I said, Millennials Are Killing Capitalism do as well as anybody I'm aware of in that work. So I just think it's a matter of being intentional and evolving a certain politics that support that intention. But yeah, and then I don't think it's, even in my relative career in journalism and media, most often these scholars are happy to be interviewed. They recognize how rare the opportunity is, and they look forward to it. And then same thing with a lot of grassroots organization. There are a lot of grassroots organization and their members who can be folded into these discussions pretty easily if the media outlets and hosts, again, with some intention and design, follow those efforts and reach out.
Just the topic of like platforming Black radical ideas. Do you think there's like an internalized fear that a lot of these people have? Like they're literally just afraid of Black people?
I mean, I'm sure there's some of that. I always assume that there's some of that exists. I think there's also the, I mean, I've even had conversations with Black creators around this. There's also a recognition that the algorithm doesn't love it. So if this is part of someone's career and they want, and dependent on views, subscribers, and money and ad revenue, the Black radical tradition is really not the way to go. I mean, I mean, just that alone can be a disincentive. But yeah, no, I mean, obviously, settler colonialism and capitalism don't encourage the kinds of challenges to white supremacy that are required. So these systems absolutely evolve an unconscious bias and hatred and anti-blackness, and then, as I was saying, there's structures built on top of that that become very overt as people say, how radical do I really want to so if you're doing a podcast, in terms of if the topic is all black studies, if you can get a Robin Kelly on your show, you're going to get numbers. Even if you veer into certain radical topics the algorithm isn't interested in, you're likely to get more numbers than if you would talking to the many more less famous and sometimes more militant scholars and activists that are in that community. So yeah,
I mean, every now and then we luck out really well by having niche knowledge on things, like our video on Sudan, really good. And then we have a video just on the history in Tigray and the genocide. It's got like 12 views.
Yeah, it's
so underviewed.
I think it might be our lowest viewed.
It's like one of the best videos made on
two
the
part
history
before it happened and the actual event itself. 2 episodes. I try and push it as much as we can, but nobody gives a shit. It's unfortunate.
And it's not that, and it's not even that nobody cares. It's that the algorithm doesn't care. And what I've learned about YouTube,
nobody knows what Tigray is.
Well, that's true. But even at the sort of the height of these issues, with few exceptions, the algorithm doesn't even, people subscribe to a channel.
Yeah, it doesn't
might
matter
not
anymore.
all even get. Well, they don't even get the alert if the algorithm doesn't, like, if it has been deemed unworthy, then even subscribers to your channel don't get the alert that you put something out. So I've noticed something similar in my own efforts here. And sometimes you're like, I put in all this work. This is a really great, and then YouTube says, I don't care. Google says, I don't care. And then I've, done something I've thought was relatively silly, and it feels like everybody cares. So yeah, but again, I think just and that's sort of the point in general. If your goal, if the work involves these kinds of topics and then critical interpretations and frames of these topics, it's just there's only so much, at least the algorithm is going to do to help you.
Jack, getting back to the Ibram X. Kennedy.
Yes.
Kenny? What is his name?
Kendi.
But like that was all over the right-wing radical stuff for a while.
What
were they complaining about?
Robin DiAngelo were the two that they were big on. It was the white fragility thing that they were going on, I think, is what specifically got them, which is very funny. But I think that was the specific route that they were going down when I saw it years ago. Years and years and years ago.
Yeah, I'm not even that familiar
when it
with...
hits Australia, it's especially getting brain rotted in the media.
I'm not as familiar with DiAngelo's work, but the arguments are, to me, the point, well, as I've understood it, the point is that these are, so the one layer of problem is that both of these are scholars attempting to write largely not radical, maybe they're critical, but they're not radical analyses of the situation, and they're targeting white affluent audiences. So one of the reasons for the backlash is that the audiences, the angry whites recognize, wait a minute, you're not just writing books about race and Black history for Black audiences. You're trying to target us. And
rabble.
Right, exactly. And now we're really going to get upset. And then, of course, the part of the shell, well, I don't know if that shell game isn't the right metaphor, but the part of the hustle is that, again, first of all, it's understood that most people that the audience is being talked, that's being reached by critical media and journalism of this scholarship, they're not reading these books. So most people in the United States, black or white, are not reading Kendi or D'Angelo's work, and they're not studying any of this. So it's when Fox News or some other white conservative goes on TV and holds up Kendi's book and says, "See, this is what's happening, and it's targeting you and your
Mm-hmm.
children."
They've done it with the
Everybody.
trans stuff too.
Oh, and then it's again another area where people, at least where I'm familiar with in this country, in the United States, are happy to remain ignorant. But again, because it's understood, and please, we should not at all be confused by this. Those who produce this content know fully well their audience does not know what is being talked about here. They don't know anything about Ibram Kendi. They don't know anything about Robin DiAngelo. They don't know anything about the real arguments around race and the histories of race and blah 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 blah. They don't. It's so all it's a, again, a marketing buzzword. People don't want to know how a hamburger is actually made. They just want to see it beautifully presented to them with nice theme music and a sunset and a happy, hungry person eating it. That's all they want. And it's the same thing here. They're not interested in what is the book really saying. What is the argument around race actually being made here? They're not interested in that. They want to be told, and are primed to be told, someone's coming for your kids, and they're talking this race stuff, which you don't like anyway, because you don't have any black friends and you don't have any black people in your social circles, and you don't really like black people because we've already prepared for you to not like black people outside of their ability to entertain and enrich you. So it's so easy to just plug and play and fill in the gaps and have people react in kind. Again, I recognize these are the biases of my fields, but it is very much like marketing and psychological warfare and branding. I mean, it's just all manipulation of public opinion which requires very little substantive knowledge, foreknowledge of the subject. Now, the flip side is, and this is just quickly where I became very critical of Finkelstein and others, is that being critical of Ibram Kendi and Robin DiAngelo and Barack Obama and others as he was, that is Finkelstein and his, that is very, on one hand, very easy, and it's also something that black scholars and scholarship have been doing for a long time. So on the one hand, there was no need for a Finkelstein to come in and be, again, another white savior saving black studies from itself. On another level, I guess, or on another hand, there was a need, and remains a need, to both raise the criticism of popular scholarship that is targeting a white audience with a pretense of being a critic, or being critical of white supremacy or anti-blackness or the condition of racialized communities in the United States or elsewhere. There's a need to be critical of that, because that is not in and of itself part of a black radical tradition. It does not offer radical criticism or analysis, and offers a way for white affluent liberals to feel better about engaging discussions of race while enriching those authors. And that's why I become more frustrated when the white alternative media, those claiming to be the alternative, don't do the routine engagement with black or other world majority critical thinkers, scholars, and activists that would mitigate some of the damage of these popular rebranded forms, and would mitigate some of the false engagement of white conservatives with that work. But the alternatives don't do that. The so-called progressives don't do that, and therefore either the Kendi types can go unquestioned and uncriticized, or their critics can be themselves unfamiliar and unfair representatives of a black radical tradition that should be for at the forefront of that criticism. So I hope all of that made sense. I feel like it could get it's a little bit nuanced, and I'm not always the best at making these summaries. But I would just say, to the extent that you or anyone who sees this are confused by what I've said, engage more these traditions and scholars, and you'll see more clearly what I'm saying.
It's just understanding through exposure. It's the same. It's literally what I tell people that I hear like making these anti-immigrant arguments when it's like this. They're not the problem. Go talk to people who aren't the same as you, and you will quickly find out that they are the same as you.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, sorry, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, I was just agreeing with him.
I mean, you
That's
know,
all.
but I also would say, like, look, if your comfort zone is not with another community and you don't know this community and you don't feel comfortable doing the actual, I'm going to go have a conversation, just acknowledge it, and then just say to yourself, look, I acknowledge I don't want to talk to them, but I also don't know anything about them, so I'm going to go read a couple things. I'm going to go watch a couple things. You could learn about the conditions of another community and not talk to them. So I don't want people to, because I know, I don't want people to feel like, oh, I have to go talk to no.
Yes.
You could just
It's
read
a good
another
point.
book or watch another video, or change your media diet a little bit, think about it a little bit, starting with the fact, which is what I encourage with my own students and with myself. How much do I not know about this subject? Like I don't know this subject. I don't know the immigrant experience of any one community. So when I'm hearing about whoever coming across whatever border, what do I really know about these people and these histories? And uh, would be one just method that I think people could. The other part, to your point, is who's hiring them. This is the part I always think is funny, and I've gotten a little bit of pleasure, I admit, watching some of the videos I've seen where white Trump voters, are lamenting the fact that he's now deporting their employees. And they're saying, wait a minute, I thought you were just going to deport the criminals. I didn't think you were going to take my cheap labor force.
He's a good hombre.
He's a good one. And the point that I'm getting at is, these are the people that, if you want to be mad at somebody, these are the people who are now coming on TV and nationally exposing themselves as being unwilling to hire white workers. These are white, mostly men, who are in some cases literally crying because their brown workforce is being deported or too afraid to come to work. And then what gets also twisted is that it was a labor movement that fought for those wages to be lifted, and the workplace safety rights and all that to be, and instead of but that movement is also assaulted in this country. So very few people are aware of that either. So then the easier thing is to just turn their anger towards these brown folks taking these jobs. But but again, but nobody wants to, you're mad at them taking the job, but you're not asking questions, who's hiring them? It's not, trust me, it's not a Latin American run business that they're working for. It's not a Mexican company.
Yes. The point that you can just engage in media is really good, and honestly a fantastic point. So talking about engaging in media, how do we approach Candace Owens?
Don't.
There's like, she have a thing where she was kind of like trying to come back to like the not racist side of things, and everyone was like, we don't want you.
Yeah,
Didn't that just happen like a month ago?
She's another one I don't follow directly. I can't stare directly into that sunlight, so I need some level of distillation. But there was an attempt at a rebrand, but because she had the fallout with her Daily Wire people over Israel and Palestine, and then she struck out on her own. She did the flat Earth thing as well, and sent one of her representatives to the final what is it, the final test that they were doing up there to show the 24-hour sun in the north.
Amazing.
I just know that she said dinosaurs aren't real.
So in terms of the work that I do, the way I would over summarize it is that she is the living embodiment of the Black capitalist narrative that I've sort of been focused on. She is a very white, conservative, sponsored and constructed argument, or personages in this case, that comes in wrapped in Blackness, that is presented by Black people. That's the whole point, that you have a Black entrepreneurial class that benefits relative to the rest of the community by selling this narrative that if you support me, we do well. If you support my business venture, we all succeed. And carried within that is again this logic of capitalism is good, white supremacy is not a problem, the only barrier is yourself. And then here comes Candace Owens, literally carrying, espousing that very message daily, that racism is not a problem, it's all in your mind, if you're a victim, and so on and so on and so on. And look at me, I'm rich, so what problem could there possibly be? What I thought briefly when I did think about the attempt at a rebrand is that there is a need for these Black spokespeople to have some. Traditionally, I've thought, at least, and argued that there's been a need for these conservative Black people to have some sort of legitimacy in the eyes of their white sponsors coming from the Black community. In other words, that they would have to have some relative or symbolic cachet amongst some segment of the Black community to be seen as viable by their white sponsors to carry that conservative narrative to Black communities. But I think Candace fits a more particular need for an affluent conservative white audience that is willing to hear from a Black woman their white supremacist news and worldviews.
Interesting.
And then can use it as a way to maybe justify those views and claim some sort of diversity, and be reminded, yeah, we're all right. See, we put her there.
So how on that, how would they deal with the cognitive dissonance of like their severe racism and listening to Candace Owens, a Black
They would
woman,
say they have a
speak?
Black friend.
Yeah, or that she's an example of, she's the rare exception to the rule.
good-
That the good one,
Yeah,
and that if you clean them up and put them in the right school and have them marry the right white partner, and
it's the mentality behind the child separation policies in Australia. That mentality. It's literally that mentality. Their mentality was, I'm going to take the uncivilized children and put them with white families to civilize them. It's that mentality. That's all I can think about.
I don't. Yeah, this is shameful on my part, but my ignorance of and my lack of, speaking of lack of engagement, my ignorance and lack of engagement with that particular history is severe enough that the last movie that actually made me weep was that Rabbit Proof Fences film.
I was going to say it's the Rabbit Proof Fence. Yep. Yes.
I haven't let loose tears like that from a film ever since, and maybe not even before. That film really messed me up. And
I don't know what that is.
Yeah.
Really?
Oh wow, yeah. And one of my children was born right around the time that I saw that film, so it was like had this other layer of oh man, yeah. You could describe it if you want to summarize it for John.
Well, we do movie stuff, so we'll watch movies with our.
We'll add that to the list, because that is a movie to watch. But talking about Australian films and Aboriginal representation, there are a lot of really good films with Indigenous actors and Indigenous roles and all that sort of stuff, talking about the history, thinking about it now. There's actually quite a few really, really, really good, impactful ones. I'm
sure there's got to be more. Yeah, sorry, go ahead.
Yeah, so I have the very common problem that Australians have, where we don't know the history. They literally
Wow.
do, like, they pretty much, they teach us the basics. They teach us that from the time that the British got here to the formation of the country to about 1975, there was genocide. Australia has had more genocide in its history than it hasn't. And this is a point that people really need to get through their heads,
Good
right?
point. Yeah.
Australia has not faced this history. They don't care about it. They don't want to hear about it. They do not care. And the most you'll get is a where sorry from the government. That's about it. That's about all they get. It's a real problem, and I've been quite on this recently because I've been coming to the realization through with our whole romantic nationalism thing. We've been looking at a lot of stuff, and I come to realize that there's quite a lot of it in Australia. For probably what they think is a pretty good reason, but
No, it
another
messes up
and
that settler
yeah,
colonial narrative for sure. Yeah.
exactly, and it messes up that whole "this is the lucky country, Australia
Yeah.
is the best country on earth" kind of thing that we're going for.
Mhm.
I also realized, talking to one of the people that follows us on Twitter, that people are also not aware that we helped Indonesia invade Timor.
East Timor.
Yeah,
Yeah.
and we occupied Timor, and the guy who everyone claims was fantastic, Paul Keating, was one of his best mates. Suharto was one of his
Wow.
best
Yeah,
mates. It's
love
like
Suharto.
Australia has such a fucked history, and it's like nobody wants to acknowledge it. Up until I think like 2008, the Navy was essentially kidnapping migrants or sinking boats and then putting them on an island for 10 years. Like,
Oh,
like
wow.
this country has a history they don't want people to know about. And it's because Australia is not an important country that this news just doesn't get out of the country. People don't care. This country doesn't care. Nobody cares about Australia. Nobody cares what happens here. We have 2 concentration islands. Like, I don't know if they're still open. They might have been closed recently because of human rights abuses. But up until recently, as you know, it's not good. It's really not good, and that kind of mentality is coming back.
But now the
Like,
Muslims are coming, so don't raise
yeah,
questions about
and
that.
now because all the Indians are here, the Indians are the problem.
No, it's amazing how these countries, these powerful settler colonial countries, can be so weakened by poor migrant populations. I mean, it's just amazing. These superpowers can just be
Crumble.
destroyed. They
Britain.
crumble by poor people crawling across a border. I mean, I've even asked some of my own students, like, have you ever really thought about how a so-called illegal immigrant gets here? Like, have you even ever, I mean, you
Do you just
know,
show them the Durian Gap?
yeah, I
You should
mean,
just show them the Durian Gap and
I
be
wanna
like,
go
"You
there
go
so
do
bad.
this."
I've had, I have, funnily enough, I have family, I have in-laws that live in that area, and I've been there. And I've been to the livable sections of the
Mm.
Darien region in Panama, and that's difficult enough. So the idea that people are going through this, like, that's the one, right? That's the one part that the intercontinental highway doesn't go, right? So it's like the whole world is connected except for this one inhabitable stretch of land, right? What's wild is that it's the immigration policy of the United States, Mexico, and probably one or two other countries that are forcing the Darien Gap to become more popular, even though it's one of the most dangerous ways to get. But my point is that the idea that people going through these nightmares to get here, they have less than nothing, that they are capable of bringing on the downfall of these. I mean, just that alone should be laughed out of the room on its face. I mean,
Yeah.
but again, it's wrapped in several hundreds of years of false narrative and mythology, so it allows people to make it make sense, and it's just, all of it is absurd.
I got a real curveball question for you.
Here we go.
All
Was
right.
the move bombing a lynching?
Oh my God.
I agree with something that James Cone has said, that lynchings are mass terrorism. And as he even put it, they are exaggerations of the pre-existing conditions, which are themselves mass terrorism and lynching. So his whole point was the ghetto is itself a mass lynching and terrorist enterprise. So the move bombing in that moment was, I guess, I'm just using that word, an exaggerated, and not even, maybe it's not, that's not a fair word to use, but it was I don't know, an inflection, a flashpoint, so to speak, of already existing horrible terroristic conditions. But yeah, so yeah, I don't have a problem with it being considered a 20th century lynching, a contemporary lynching, to bomb a residential home. And I've been on Osage Avenue. I've been to that street, and if you haven't been there, it's hard to imagine how congested and those row houses are. So you're not just bombing one row house and killing and then shooting people as they escape the fires and the flames, including
Children as well.
Yeah, but you're doing it to a whole block.
Mm.
You know, a few hundred people, if I'm not mistaken, lost residences after, and then on top of that, you take the bones of the victims and put them in the museum there in Pennsylvania.
What the fuck? Really?
Oh
I
yeah,
didn't know
they were that story
Oh my
broke about
God.
2, 3, 4 years ago. Something like they took the bones of these dead children and put them for anthropological study or whatever, and so it in one of those big museums there in Pennsylvania. So in some ways, yeah, the lynching is perfect, because a part of the lynching, of course, was the collection of body parts and genitalia of the victim.
Yeah,
For
literally.
collection and
Yeah.
for storing and memory and posterity. So in some ways, this is more of a state, given that it involved the police, the fire department, and then the state itself through its museums and schools. It becomes part of the collection and trophy accumulation of the terror. Mumia is still in prison, and the Africa movement and family are still recovering from years of imprisonment and families being destroyed, and the psychological terror and all of that. And the physical, Ramona, Africa still has disfigurement from surviving that.
Today, I still have the burn scars from May 13th of 85. And some people have told me, you should get cosmetic surgery. They can take that off. And I'm saying, why would I want to take it off? I want to be reminded.
Physical disfigurement, never mind the mental torment, that I can only imagine accompanies that. So yeah, I think that's a fair way of putting it. 20th century lynching.
That's like the big event that people don't believe me when I say that it happened. People who like defend the United States and stuff. That's the number one thing that I think I come across. People have no idea that happened, and they're in like disbelief. And
I only found out
actually
about
shakes them.
Like a few months ago. You showed me it a few months ago.
I think you knew about it beforehand, but you probably like forgot about it because it's, it's American stuff and you're Australian.
Yeah.
Look, it's a terrible incident, and I think it's, the ignorance in this country, in the United States, is imposed and tremendous. And if folks are not just sort of well informed in general about in this case, the history of Black people and particularly Black radical movements, the move bombing would seem unbelievable. If you study at all, August is coming up, the tradition of Black August that emanates out of the commemoration of the assassination of George Jackson and the Attica prison uprising, where every year the month of August is used to commemorate not only revolutionary moments in in Black history, but a time to fast and sort of reflect and re-engage the fight. If you study those histories and those traditions, what happened with the MOVE bombing is a lot less shocking than it should be, or it would seem to be. It is really unbelievable. I mean, I would encourage people. I've been reading it and teaching it this summer. I don't have it with me here, but Orasami Burton's book, Tip of the Spear, about the Long Attica Revolt. It is one of the best books I've ever read, and it is a brilliant examination through the study of prisons and the Attica Revolt in particular, but what this country is actually up to and has been up to. And as a media studies guy, I actually think it's one of the best books you can get. I don't think he meant it to be this, but in studying propaganda and psychological warfare and how communication is used in the United States and in empire. But yeah, and then the MOVE bombing becomes an unfortunate, it loses its specialness in the context of all that has been done and is still going on. But yeah, so, but I mean, yeah, that's a good one too.
You could compare it to Waco, right? And everyone knows about Waco for some reason.
Except I think some key differences, because I wouldn't want anyone to confuse the politics of MOVE and John Africa with David Koresh and all of that. And I don't want people to think it was some sort of cult and all this other kind of stuff. But good point. But again, David Koresh, one of the reasons why Waco was more well known is because it was happening to white people, or a white man in particular, and then white people. I know there were others in there that unfortunately were killed, but and then the white nationalist movement made it a cause célèbre, so to speak, and helped popularize it, and through their actions, like in the Tulsa bombing, made Waco the seminal, or the important symbol that it remains. But part of what happened with the MOVE bombing was that, you know, on the one hand, all that I said about the Waco differences, and then also that Waco was seen by most as targeting sort of a lunatic fringe religious figure, makes it more of a welcome sensational story into the home. But the problem with the MOVE issue is that MOVE was connected to a Black revolutionary politics, at least symbolically, if not fully. They had their own specific ideology. But so when Black radicals are seen to exist and then be executed, that's less of an excitement or less of a spectacle of interest than would be Waco. But I don't know. I mean,
that was pretty much the point I was getting at.
Yeah,
that people know about it because they happen to white people.
Yeah, and
weren't they Protestant?
And also,
Seventh-day Adventist offshoot, which is technically Protestant.
Right.
Definitely has nothing to do with it.
No, I think that's actually a good point. Actually, that's a good point. I didn't really think of it that way. But yeah. I do have to start to wrap up here in a little bit. So
that's what I was going to wrap up with. I was going to say, cool. You promoted a few other books, but I wanted to maybe get a plug for your book.
Well, I appreciate it. The Myth and Propaganda of Black Buying Power. The short of it is, my argument is a subset of the critique of Black capitalism. And it was just trying to target this one particular claimed myth that is often used to tell Black people that Black people are poor because of their own financial illiteracy. And this idea that Black people have this buying power, and if they would use it better, we could pool our resources and become, they often say that the Black buying power is the equivalent of the Mexican GDP or something like that. So long story short, it's mythological, it's not real, and it's part of a narrative meant to convince Black people that they're poor because they've made bad choices. And that capitalism is good, and if you use it properly, you can do well. So I wanted to try to challenge that mythology, which ends up leading into a criticism of capitalism and the media environment, and how that media environment is weaponized against a colonized population. So it's just a subset argument of that broader critique.
And then, of course, we'll have like your link tree and your YouTube channel down in the description and
all that fun stuff.
all that fun stuff. No,
I appreciate all the technicalities and YouTube jibber jabber.
And I appreciate the invitation, and
Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, anytime.
Through the years, America has stood as the world symbol for law and order. Anarchy, well, that was something that was always happening in other countries. Newsworthy, perhaps, but it could never happen here. The policeman on the corner has traditionally been looked upon as a friend, not as the instrument of a tyrant. People in other countries had just reasons to riot against their governments. The nations of the world are dictatorships in one form or another.